Go on, get comfy, tuck yourself in, grab a warm drink, and let the world slow down for a moment. This is the story of a girl called Carrie, a dog named Milo with one white paw, and a garden that whispered to them when the world felt too loud. Some gates don't open with keys, they open with quiet hearts. Welcome to Milo and the Whispering Gate, a story for the dreamers and the ones who still believe in magic. The morning that felt different. It was a bright, breezy morning at Nanny Pat's cottage, the kind of morning where the sunshine felt extra golden, and even the birdsong seemed to giggle. Carrie sat on the back step, tying her shoelaces with sleepy fingers. She still had pillow lines on her cheek, and her long black hair was tied in a loose, messy ponytail. The fresh smell of grass and toast drifted from the open kitchen window, where Nanny Pat was humming a tune and buttering crumpets. Milo was already bouncing across the garden, chasing a butterfly that didn't seem to mind. His jet-black coat shimmered in the light, and his one white front paw made a little tap-tap-tap every time he landed. Carrie laughed as he spun in a circle, skidding into the flower pots by the shed. "You're a total disaster," she said, but her eyes sparkled as she said it. Then the wind changed, just a little, just enough. Carrie paused. Milo stopped too. A quiet rustle came from the far side of the garden, past the wild mint, past the old stone path that led to the orchard. It wasn't loud. It was whispery, like the wind was trying to say something. Carrie stood slowly. Milo tilted his head. They'd both heard it, and without saying a word, they knew. Today was going to be anything but ordinary. Carrie grabbed a slice of crumpet from the windowsill as she passed, still warm, soaked with butter, and stuffed it in her pocket. "In case of emergencies," she whispered, with a grin. Milo was already waiting by the edge of the overgrown path, his tail wagging slow and steady. The whispering sound had returned, threading through the leaves, curling around the stems of Nanny Pat's roses. The old stone path hadn't been used in ages. Nanny Pat had once said it led nowhere, just toward the woods and an old broken fence. But this morning, it looked different. The sunlight seemed to bend toward it, like it was pointing the way, and the grass that usually covered the stones had pulled back, just slightly, as if it was letting them pass. Carrie crouched beside Milo and ran a hand down his back. "Should we see where it goes?" Milo licked her cheek in reply, his classic way of saying, obviously, yes. So off they went, one careful step at a time, past the old shed with its ivy-covered roof, past the forgotten wheelbarrow, and down the narrow path that curved gently out of sight. And as they walked, the whisper grew clearer. Not louder, just closer. As if something ahead was waiting, something that had been waiting a very long time. The path curved gently through a patch of tall grass and tiny wildflowers, swaying like they were whispering too. Milo's nose twitched with every step, and he moved carefully now. Not his usual bounce, but that special walk he did when something felt important. Carrie brushed aside low-hanging branches as they went deeper, the air growing cooler, the sun dappled through the trees. Birds chirped above, but even they seemed softer here, like they knew they were somewhere special. Then the path stopped, or rather, it paused. Right at the edge of the garden, where Nanny Pat's flowers ended and the wild land began, stood a stone wall, half covered in moss and thyme. And in the very centre of that wall was a small wooden gate. But not just any gate. This one looked ancient, weathered, like it had secrets in its hinges and memories in its grain, and carved across the top, just barely visible beneath the moss, were 5 words, "For those who truly listen." Carrie stepped closer, heart thudding. She ran her fingers across the carving. Milo sat beside her, quiet now, ears perked. The gate didn't creak, it didn't swing open, but it whispered again, not in words, in feeling. And just like that, Carrie and Milo knew. This gate wasn't locked. It was waiting. Carrie took a deep breath, her heart fluttering like a leaf in the breeze. She glanced down at Milo. "Shall we?" she whispered. Milo gave a soft woof, quiet but sure, and stepped forward first, his one white paw brushing the bottom of the gate. And without a single sound, the gate opened. Not like a door, not on hinges. It unfolded, like mist parting, like a curtain lifting, just for them. Beyond the gate, the world looked different, not wild or strange, but brighter, more alive. as if everything beyond it had been painted with sun and breeze and soft magic. The trees shimmered with a silver-green glow. The sky looked bluer somehow, deeper, like it had secrets it wanted to share. Carrie stepped through, the moss cool under her feet, the gate quietly closing behind them without a sound. They stood together in a clearing full of tall grasses and whispering wildflowers. Milo sniffed the air and sneezed, which made Carrie laugh. But then they both felt it. That sense you get when someone is watching you, not in a scary way, but in a curious, welcoming way, like a place that had been waiting for company, and somewhere, not far off, came the sound again. The whisper. Only now, it didn't feel like a whisper at all. It felt like an invitation. The whisper came again, not loud but clearer, like wind in the trees. Only steadier, more certain. Milo froze, ears forward, nose twitching. He let out a single soft chuff and took a step ahead. Carrie followed, brushing past tall ferns and a tangle of honeysuckle vines that seemed to lean toward her as she passed. "Hello?" she called out, but not very loud. It didn't feel like a place where you needed to shout, more like a place where quiet knew the way. The whisper came again, but this time it wasn't in the air. It was everywhere. In the sway of the leaves, in the flutter of butterfly wings, in the hush between bird songs. Then Carrie noticed the trees ahead had changed. They weren't like the ones in Nanny Pat's garden. These were taller, older, with trunks so wide 2 people couldn't wrap their arms around them. Their bark was etched with swirls and lines, as if they'd been writing their own stories for centuries. And in the center of them all stood a tree like no other. Its bark shimmered faintly, touched with silver and green. The leaves glowed softly in the sunlight, not bright but warm, welcoming. Milo stepped closer, nose to the base of the tree, tail slowly wagging. Then the whisper turned into something else entirely. A voice, gentle, kind, like wind and memory mixed together. "Welcome, dreamers," it said. Carrie's breath caught in her chest. The tree was speaking. Carrie took a step closer, eyes wide. She could feel something in the air now. Not wind exactly, but a sort of hush, like the whole clearing was listening. Milo sat at the base of the glowing tree, his one white paw resting gently on a thick root. His eyes were wide too, but calm, like he somehow understood this was important. The tree's voice came again, not out loud, not with words exactly, but inside their hearts, like a memory returning just when you need it. "I remember you," it said. "Not from today, but from always." Carrie knelt beside Milo and placed her hand on the bark. It was warm, not like sun warm, but like hug warm, like Nanny Pat's hands when she tucks the blanket just right. "Why are we here?" Carrie whispered, not expecting an answer, but the tree replied. "Because sometimes, when the world is noisy, you need a quiet place that still knows who you are." The bark beneath her hand shimmered slightly, and images flickered across it like a film. A tiny Carrie toddling through the garden in rainbow wellies. Milo as a clumsy puppy chasing bees. Nanny Pat holding a storybook under the stars. Moments they hadn't thought about in ages, but the tree remembered. It held them. Carrie felt her throat tighten, not with sadness, but something deeper. A kind of peaceful ache. The kind that reminds you you're home. Milo gave a soft sigh, his tail brushing the grass, and as the light shifted above them, the tree whispered once more. "Come further. The garden is waking." Carrie and Milo stepped gently past the story tree, where its roots faded into a soft, mossy path lit by flickers of golden light. The air smelled sweeter now, like wildflowers after rain, and something else, something old and comforting. The whisper had stopped, but the feeling hadn't. Every step felt like walking through a memory. Familiar, but not in a way Carrie could explain. She glanced down at Milo. He was trotting slowly ahead, ears alert but relaxed, his one white paw glowing slightly as it touched the moss. The path opened up ahead, and suddenly they were standing at the edge of a secret garden. It wasn't like Nanny Pat's garden. This one stretched out like a soft dream, tall white flowers that hummed, glowing bluebells that blinked open as they passed, vines that curled politely out of the way. Everything shimmered slightly, like it wasn't quite finished being made. Carrie gasped softly. In the center of it all stood an archway made entirely of willow branches and soft, silvery light. It wasn't just a decoration, it was a gate. It whispered without sound, "Come in." Milo paused, looked back at Carrie, then padded forward through the archway. Carrie followed, heart thumping, not with fear but with wonder. Because this wasn't just a garden. This was a place that remembered dreams, and it had been waiting for them. As Carrie stepped through the willow arch, the world softened. The garden on the other side didn't look big, not at first, but the more you looked, the more it grew. Paths curled in directions you hadn't noticed a second ago. Trees shifted ever so slightly, as though making space for you. Flowers turned their heads like they were listening. It felt alive. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of lavender, mint, and something she couldn't name, like sunshine and secrets wrapped in petals. Milo moved slowly beside her, his nose twitching with every step. His tail gave a small wag, but not the bouncy, excited kind. This was a careful wag, a respectful wag. Like even he understood that this wasn't just a place to play. Carrie reached out and touched a silvery fern. It curled around her finger like it knew her. When she let go, the fern uncurled with a quiet sigh, like a page turning in a book only the garden could read. There was a soft hum, deep beneath the ground. It wasn't scary. It was the kind of sound you feel in your bones, like a lullaby you didn't know you remembered. "Do you think it's all real?" Carrie whispered. Milo didn't answer, of course. But he nudged her leg gently with his nose, and that was enough. Because whether it was a dream or not didn't matter. What mattered was that it felt real. And sometimes that's the kind of magic that stays with you forever. The garden didn't speak with words, but it knew. It knew who Carrie was. It knew about her bedtime stories with Nanny Pat, and how she always left a bit of toast crust for Milo. It knew about the day her shoe got stuck in the stream and how she laughed instead of cried. It even knew how she sometimes felt different, like her thoughts didn't quite match the noise of the world. And somehow, without needing to say a thing, the garden understood. Everywhere she looked, something seemed to recognize her. A daisy opening wider as she passed, a mossy stone glowing faintly when her foot touched it. One tree even bent the smallest branch down to brush Milo's ear. "Did that just—" Carrie giggled. Milo gave a small sneeze and wagged his tail, and somehow it felt like he was laughing too. They wandered slowly, the path winding now through archways of soft golden light. At one point, they passed a patch of dandelions so fluffy and bright, they looked like little stars waiting to be wished on. Carrie knelt down, closed her eyes, and blew. The seeds floated upward like tiny lanterns, dancing in the air, and instead of drifting off, they spiraled gently above her head, making a shape. A heart. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Milo leaned into her side, and the garden simply kept glowing. As they followed the path deeper, the garden began to shift. The colours softened, like someone had taken a paintbrush and dipped it in warm water. The flowers changed too. Now they were taller, dreamier, with petals like silk and edges that shimmered just a little in the sunlight. And then they saw them. Figures. Not people, not animals, something in between. They weren't scary. They were soft shapes made of light and shadow, with gentle faces and long flowing cloaks that rippled like mist. They moved slowly, like dancers underwater. Some hovered near the trees, others drifted across the grass, touching leaves with long fingers that glowed at the tips. Carrie's breath caught in her throat, not from fear, but from wonder. Milo stepped in front of her, ears up, tail still. He didn't growl. He just watched. One of the figures turned toward them and smiled, not with a mouth, but with a feeling. It raised a hand and pointed to a small clearing just beyond a row of glowing mushrooms. Then it faded, like morning mist in sunlight. Carrie looked at Milo. "I think they want us to go that way." He looked back at her with those big brown eyes, then started walking. And just like that, the two of them, girl and dog, stepped into a part of the garden that felt older, like it had been waiting for them for a very, very long time. The clearing was shaped like a circle, perfectly round, like it had been drawn by the moon herself. In the centre stood a single stone bench, old, worn, smoothed by time and weather and covered in tiny carvings. Carrie ran her fingers over them. Stars, feathers, paw prints, and what looked like a teacup. "How did they know?" she whispered. The air was cooler here, but not cold. Just calm, like a held breath, like a memory. Milo sniffed the bench, then hopped up and sat beside her. He didn't fidget. He didn't bark. He just looked out at the stillness in front of them, Ears perked, tail curled gently around his paws. Then the wind picked up, just a little. It stirred the tall grass in slow ripples and tugged softly at Carrie's hair. A few petals floated past, each one glowing faintly. One landed in her lap. It pulsed with warmth. The carvings on the bench began to shimmer, not brightly, just enough to see. Carrie traced a paw print with her finger. "That's yours," she said, smiling at Milo, and then her eyes landed on a tiny heart etched in the corner, with a C inside it. She blinked. "How does it know me?" Milo licked her hand as if to say, "Some places just do." She didn't ask any more questions. Some places don't give answers, they give feelings, and this one felt like home. Carrie sat still on the bench, the wind curling softly around her like a story just beginning to be told. And then she heard it. Not a voice. Not even a sound, really. More like a feeling that brushed the edge of her heart, a thought without words, a whisper that wasn't spoken but understood. She turned to Milo, who was staring into the trees ahead. His ears twitched, but he didn't move. He was listening too. The whisper came again. It didn't say her name, but it knew it. It didn't speak out loud, but it told her things. "You are seen. You are safe. You are stronger than you think." Carrie's eyes welled up with quiet tears, but she wasn't sad. It was like her heart had let go of something it had been holding on to for too long. She reached down and ran her hand over Milo's back. "Can you hear them too?" she asked. Milo looked up, one ear flopping to the side, then nudged her with his nose. She smiled. "Of course you can." The whisper came one more time, softer now, like it was fading into the breeze. "The gate opens for those who need to remember." Carrie didn't fully understand what that meant, but she knew it was true, and sometimes truth doesn't need explaining. The path curved again, gentle as a lullaby, and opened into a space that felt even quieter than before. At the center stood a tree. It wasn't tall or grand like the ones back home, but there was something about it, something sacred. Its trunk was wide and twisted, with bark the color of old tea. From its branches hung ribbons, long, fluttering every color of the sky. Carrie stepped closer. Each ribbon had something tied to it. A pebble, a button, a leaf, a drawing, a tiny toy. Not cluttered, not messy, just placed. Offerings. Memories. Milo sniffed gently at the base of the tree, then sat down and looked up. His eyes followed the movement of the ribbons as they swayed like stories in the wind. Carrie touched one. It felt warm, soft, like the pocket of her favorite jacket, the one Nanny Pat had mended when it tore, the one she used to tuck notes into during winter walks. She didn't say anything, didn't need to. Because suddenly she remembered. Not just the moment, the feeling, the laughter, the safety, the love. And it wasn't just hers, it was everyone's. Every ribbon was a moment someone didn't want to forget. Carrie turned to Milo. "Do you think we're allowed to leave one too?" He tilted his head and gave a tiny tail thump. Carrie smiled. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a little stone, smooth and oval, with a faint heart shape etched in chalk from their walk that morning. With quiet fingers, she tied it to a ribbon of soft green. The ribbon accepted it, and the tree glowed, just for a second, but that was enough. As they left the memory tree behind, the garden grew even quieter. Not silent, listening, like the wind had paused mid-song. Up ahead, nestled between two tall hedges that sparkled faintly with dew, stood an archway. Not a grand gate, not iron or wood, but something softer. It was made entirely of branches and wildflowers, woven together in twists of lavender, honeysuckle, and pale silver vines. The blossoms blinked slowly, like sleepy eyes. The air around it shimmered gently, like heat rising from a sun-warmed path. Carrie felt it before she even stepped closer. A pull, a hum, not from the gate itself, but from inside her. Milo padded forward, stopping just at the edge. His tail wagged once, then stilled. His head tilted. The gate didn't swing open, it didn't need to, it simply whispered. Carrie didn't hear words, not exactly, just a feeling, soft, gentle, deep. The way someone might call your name when you're half asleep, but in a voice that says, "You're safe here." She crouched beside Milo and placed a hand on his back. "I think it's asking if we're ready." Milo blinked, and then slowly they stepped through together. The moment they passed beneath the gate, everything changed, not in shape but in soul. The air grew warmer, the light softer, the path wider somehow, like it had been waiting. The whispering gate didn't close behind them, it simply faded, like the end of a lullaby. And the garden, grew even more magical. Beyond the Whispering Gate, the path curved gently until it opened into a wide clearing, a soft, quiet space tucked deep in the garden's heart. Carrie and Milo stepped out onto a patch of velvet-like moss, where sunlight filtered through tall, silver-leafed trees and fell in dappled puddles across the ground. At the centre of the clearing stood a perfect circle of ancient stones, tall and smooth, each one covered in fine cracks and patterns that glowed ever so faintly, like moonlight had been etched into them long ago. They weren't big or scary. They didn't hum with power or magic. They just were. Steady. Gentle. Waiting. Milo sniffed the air and walked straight into the middle of the circle, nose twitching. Carrie followed, the grass cool under her feet, her heart oddly still. The moment they both stepped inside, a breeze swept through the garden, but it didn't blow. It whispered. The stones began to glow a little brighter. Not all at once, just little flickers, like candles being lit in a quiet chapel. And then soft images began to appear in the air, not in front of their eyes, but in front of their hearts. Carrie saw a flash of herself as a tiny girl chasing Milo through the fields behind Nanny Pat's house, Milo's tail wagging, his ears flying like floppy flags. She saw Nanny Pat holding her hand while planting seeds, saying, "Some things take time, but they bloom when they're ready." Milo saw something too, a memory of the first time Carrie hugged him tight in the thunderstorm, when he was just a pup and everything felt scary. But she'd wrapped a blanket around them both and whispered, "You're my brave boy." Neither of them spoke, because the garden didn't need them to. It was showing them something, that the best stories don't always come from books. Sometimes they come from inside. From the moments we tuck away and remember only when the garden whispers them back. Carrie blinked, her heart full and eyes wide, still feeling the hush of the stone circle. Milo gave a little sigh beside her, then turned, ears up, nose twitching again. Something was calling them. Not loud, just gently. They followed the narrow path out of the circle, winding through tall grass and under twisted trees with bark like river ripples. Every leaf overhead shimmered faintly, as if lit from within. It didn't feel like walking. It felt like remembering something you hadn't known you'd forgotten. And then they saw her. A tall figure stood beneath an arched tree where the path opened wide again. Not quite a person, not quite an animal. She had the soft face of an owl, the grace of a deer, and a robe that moved like water in moonlight. Carrie stopped. Milo sat at her feet without needing to be told. The figure knelt gently, her eyes kind and old as stars. "Welcome, little ones," she said in a voice that sounded like wind through trees. "This garden knows your hearts, it always has." Carrie didn't know what to say, but somehow that was okay. The figure smiled. "You've walked the garden, you've listened, and now it's time for you to carry something home." She held out her hands, and in her palms glowed a tiny stone key, no bigger than a pebble, smooth and warm, with swirls of light dancing across it. "It isn't for unlocking doors," she whispered. "It's for unlocking moments, safe ones, soft ones, ones that remind you who you are." Carrie reached out, her fingers closed around the key, and just like that, the trees around them sighed, a quiet, gentle sound, like the garden itself had been waiting for this all along. Milo gave a little huff of breath. The path ahead glowed brighter now, and somewhere in the distance, the Whispering Gate began to hum. The path grew wider with every step, lined with stones that sparkled faintly beneath their feet. Carrie held the stone key gently in one hand, its warmth pulsing softly like a tiny heartbeat. Milo trotted ahead, tail steady, nose low to the ground. He didn't bark, he didn't race, he just walked like he already knew exactly where to go. And then there it was, the Whispering Gate. It stood in the middle of a small clearing, made of weathered wood wrapped in silver ivy and soft moss. The gate wasn't locked, it wasn't even closed, but it shimmered faintly, like it was part of both this world and another at the same time. The wind shifted, and that's when Carrie heard it. A low, musical hum, almost like voices. Not loud, not clear, just soft whispers full of kindness, wrapped in memory. Carrie stepped closer, and the whispers grew stronger. They weren't saying things she could understand, not with words. But she felt them, little things. Like the sound of her dad's laughter on a Sunday morning, the way Nanny Pat rubbed her back when she was sick, the exact moment Milo licked her cheek after her very worst day, It was like the gate knew her heart and was reminding her of every safe place it had ever carried. Milo sat beside her, his one white paw glowing faintly in the light. Carrie didn't need to ask what came next. She reached out and placed the stone key gently against the wood. The gate didn't swing open, it simply breathed. And with that breath something shimmered through the clearing. Not magic exactly, but memory made bright. Carrie and Milo stepped forward, not to leave the garden behind, but to carry it with them. Carrie stepped through the gate, with Milo close beside her, his shoulder brushing gently against her leg. The air on the other side felt different. Not colder, not darker, just deeper. It was like stepping into a place made of feelings instead of things, where the wind carried memories and every blade of grass knew your name. Trees arched overhead, their leaves whispering soft secrets in voices that sounded just like lullabies. The sky shimmered in a soft gold haze, and far ahead a small pond glistened in the light. Carrie paused and took it all in. It didn't feel like a new place. It felt like a remembering. Milo looked up at her, tail wagging slow and steady. They didn't need to talk. They just walked, side by side, hearts wide open, letting the quiet guide them. Around them, flowers opened in their wake, pale blue, soft yellow, and blush pink. Their petals moved without wind, as if smiling at old friends. A breeze stirred the ivy around the path, and somewhere in the distance chimes began to ring, low and sweet. Then Carrie heard something again, a whisper. This time it was clearer, not a voice in her ears, but in her chest. You already have the key to every good thing, right where it's always been. Carrie didn't speak. She just smiled, that small kind of smile you only get when the world feels exactly right. Milo barked once, soft and short, like he agreed. And together they stepped further into the garden of memory, heart and hush, a place not found on any map, but always waiting to be returned to. The garden opened wide around them now, stretching out in slow waves of golden grass, sleepy flowers, and soft hums that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Carrie crouched beside a bloom the size of her hand. It shimmered pale silver with tiny golden freckles. When she leaned in, it gave off the smell of warm biscuits and old storybooks. Milo sniffed it too and gave a little sneeze. Carrie giggled. Everything in this place knew them. Not just who they were now, but who they had been, and maybe even who they were becoming. Up ahead stood a large stone, smooth, warm, and glowing faintly in the light. It looked like it had been waiting there for centuries, just for them. On its surface, swirls and symbols danced slowly across the stone like ripples in a pond. Carrie reached out and touched it with her fingers. The stone warmed beneath her palm. Then the whispers came again, not loud, not even urgent, just steady, like a heartbeat beneath the soil. Every path you've ever walked has brought you here. Every kindness you've shown has kept the gate open, and every good thing you carry will grow, even when you forget to look. Carrie closed her eyes for a moment and breathed in, the scent of fresh rain, of lavender, of safety. She turned to Milo. Can you feel it too? Milo didn't answer with words. He just pressed his head against her side and gave a soft huff of air through his nose, the way he always did when the world felt perfect. They sat there for a while, saying nothing, just being, and the garden, alive and gentle, bloomed quietly around them. Just as Carrie stood up and brushed the grass from her knees, the air shifted, like someone had gently turned a page in the sky. A hush fell over the garden. Not silence, something deeper, like the world holding its breath. Then Milo's ears perked up. At the far edge of the garden, tucked between two tall willow trees, a shape began to shimmer. Not glowing, not sparkling, just shimmering. Like heat rising off summer tarmac. Like something that didn't want to be seen unless you were ready. Carrie stepped closer, heart steady but curious. It was a gate. But not like the one at Nanny Pat's vegetable patch. This one looked like it had grown from the earth itself, made of twisted roots and ivy, wildflowers in bloom, and little golden leaves that rustled even though there was no wind. It had no lock, no hinges, no handle. It simply whispered. Carrie and Milo stood before it, side by side. Milo tilted his head. Carrie reached out slowly, fingertips brushing the vines. A warm pulse ran through her hand and up her arm, not like a shock, but like a welcome, like the gate was happy to see her. She turned to Milo. "What do you think?" she asked quietly. Milo wagged his tail once, the tip thudding gently against the grass. The gate didn't open. It didn't need to. It simply let them through. And as they stepped into whatever lay beyond, the garden behind them whispered once more, like a lullaby you never quite forget. Not all doors are meant to close. On the other side of the whispering gate was something Carrie had never seen before. A meadow, round and quiet, like it had been waiting just for them. The grass swayed in slow motion, though there was no wind. Wildflowers covered the ground like confetti from a forgotten celebration, and above them the sky felt wider somehow, like it stretched all the way to the edge of a dream. In the centre stood a single tree. It wasn't tall or grand. It wasn't twisted or strange. It was simple, round, sturdy, with bark the colour of warm toast and leaves that shimmered silver and green. Carrie felt it before she understood it. This place, it echoed, but not with noise, with feelings. She walked slowly toward the tree, Milo close at her side, his one white paw brushing gently through the flowers. And as they moved, it happened. Soft echoes began to ripple in the air, not sounds but memories. Familiar ones. Carrie and Milo splashing in the stream last summer, the first time she fed him toast crusts under the table. That rainy afternoon they sat under the blanket fort reading stories while the wind howled outside. The memories didn't play like videos. They rose around them like the scent of old books or fresh lavender, wrapping them in a feeling of home. Carrie reached out and touched the tree. It was warm, and beneath her hand it pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. Like the tree remembered everything too. Carrie stood with her hand pressed against the bark. It didn't feel like wood exactly. It felt like a story, one told in quiet sighs and soft leaf rustles, the kind of story that didn't need words, the kind you just felt. Milo sat beside her, his tail still, his ears relaxed. He wasn't sniffing or twitching or pulling ahead. He just waited, like he knew something sacred was happening. The tree shimmered gently under her fingers, and then, like a whisper from the roots, it answered, not out loud, not even in her head, but in her heart. A warm hum bloomed in her chest. Not a thought, not a picture, just a knowing. You are seen. Carrie blinked, surprised at how clear the feeling was. You are part of this. She didn't know what this was, but she didn't need to. She felt safe, like the tree understood something about her, not just who she was, but everything that had ever made her laugh, cry, or wonder. Milo nudged her gently. Then, to her amazement, the tree dropped something, not a leaf, not a blossom, but a key, a small one, brass and warm, with a spiral etched into the middle like a curl of wind. Carrie picked it up slowly. "What does it open?" she whispered, but the tree gave no answer, only the soft rustle of leaves, and in that moment she understood. Some keys aren't for doors. Some keys are for reminders. The path ended not with a gate, not with a wall, but with a circle of life, soft and golden like the last hug of summer. Carrie stepped into it with Milo at her side, and suddenly they were home. Back in Nanny Pat's garden. The breeze was just a breeze now, the tree was just a tree. But something in the world had changed. No, something in them. Carrie looked down at Milo, his white paw pressed into the earth like a promise. She knelt and scratched behind his ears. "Was it real?" she asked, half smiling. Milo leaned into her, his eyes bright and quiet all at once. She reached into her pocket. The key was still there. She didn't need to show it to anyone. Not Nanny Pat, not even Milo. She just needed to know. Because some adventures don't need proof. Some doors only open when your heart is listening. And some whispers stay with you, even long after the gate has closed.